Hey guys, Dov here, back with another hero highlight today, talking about the criminally underrated Dwarven Engineer. Very good in multiplayer, and yet you don't see him used a whole lot. One of the reasons he's so good is that dwarf characters are all foot characters. They're all infantry speed, and him having a gun, a ranged attack, means he doesn't necessarily need to waddle over to a certain spot to get something done. He just needs to waddle over, within 180 meters of it. It's got armor-piercing damage at range with his gun, armor-piercing and melee with this cog hammer thing. Today, just carrying the Fiery Ring of Thori, 3 times use AoE damage item, very good against the Tomb King's infantry, which, obviously, up against the Tomb Kings here, we've got some Trollhammer torpedoes and a couple of Fire Drakes. Thorgrim Grudgebearer leading the way. This is why I say not all Dwarf Lords are purely Foot Lords, although he is still infantry speed. You can see that Casket of Souls raining in on these Dwarf Warriors here. We've got some Bolt Throwers, 3 Bolt Throwers, a bunch of Dragonback Slayers, regular Slayers, Longbeards out to the flanks. For the Tomb Kings, got 2 War Sphinxes coming up. One of them is Cetra's Mount. We've also got Tomb Guard in the front line, along with some Skeletons, and a wild double Casket pick. And let's see how it goes. I guess I've been seeing a lot of the Fire Drakes recently, and I guess the thing with the Fire Drakes here is to roast out Skeletons. Trollhammers come in, and they're going to actually do some really legit damage if Cetra's not careful. But he's got to pull away there. But where's the Engineer? Here he is. All this time, the little guy's poking away, plinking away with his little lever action, just doing consistent DPS to Cetra this whole time. And it's not super high DPS. Like, he doesn't have the highest missile damage in the world. It's actually a little bit low, but given that he has a ton of ammo, like 40 shots of this armor-piercing damage, got a decent reload time too. He can kind of just plink away here, and it's already done a significant amount of damage between the Trollhammer torpedoes, which are kind of getting a decent amount of shots. It looks like mostly going after those units, trying to keep this backline secured against the Carrion and Skeleton Horsemen and so on that are coming through. They have done some damage to Cetra, but a lot of that damage coming from the Engineer there. If we have a look over here, Thorgrim's fighting the other one. It looks like Oath of Vengeance probably being used there, just barely dropped perhaps. But that Oath of Vengeance can be used to good effect on any unit in melee, of course. Especially when combined with something like Slayers or Hammerers that actually have really nice DPS. The undead forces are pushing. It's definitely a very concerted effort to try and shut down all the Dwarven gun units. The thing is, in this type of a situation, like they're swarming the Bolt Throwers, they're swarming the Iron Drakes, all of which is very understandable, but the Engineer is kind of just slipping by unnoticed here. Yeah, there's like this one Carrion that's pecking at him, and then it immediately gets burnt to a crisp by a flamethrower, so he's fine now. He can get his gun back out and continue plinking. Is this actually a lever action? I guess it's still probably a muzzle loader, but it would be cool if it was a lever action. These poor little Skeletons, I mean, he does have 120 armor as well. Not great melee stats at all. In fact, like, as bad as some of the worst casters. 38 attack and 30 defense is pretty poor, but a little bit of armor-piercing weapon strength. I mean, granted, again, still like half the weapon strength, literally, of somebody like Kolek. But that 120 armor, decent amount of HP, means he can fight okay for a little bit of time in a supporting hero fight. But really, his main damage comes at range here, and he's just going to be taking pot shots, just sharpshooting the whole time. Just absolutely blinking. And that's all he needs to do. He can kind of act as a single entity, what do you would call? Thunderer? Nice little Fire Ring of Thori too. You can see it doesn't do too much damage to the Tomb Guard, but every little bit helps. And for dwarf characters, this is one of the reasons why Thorgrim is also so good. Any ability that you can use at range, right? Any ability that's castable at a range, that you don't have to be in that specific place. That includes the ranged attack. It's just going to be better for dwarf characters because they're so slow, limited in their mobility. Having things that you can use at a distance, it makes them so much more useful. That's why a Runesmith has always been such a good pick, because Rune of Wrath and Ruin is something that's castable, right? And again, with Thorgrim, that Oath of Vengeance is something that's castable. It will affect, you can throw it out like a few hundred meters, I think, on its range. And again, with the ranged attack, both of the gun and this Fire Ring of Thori can also be seen as a little bit of a castable ability. all being at a distance from where this engineer can get to is a benefit. He will fight a little bit against these Tomb Guards in melee. It's really not going to do too much. Thorgrim comes over to reunify with him. Make sure he's got some support. These two will now fight side by side here against their undead foe. Just absolutely hammering. I love the look of the Cog Hammer, too. It's probably one of the cooler looking weapons in the game, even though it doesn't deal all that much damage. Engineers in campaign, too, are quite strong in their ability to give you more reload rate and ammunition in your stacks and everything. I'm a big fan in both campaign and in multiplayer. I think they're awesome. I would love, at some point, to get mounts for these guys. Like, if they could actually mount an artillery piece, that would be probably the coolest. Or maybe a gyro bomber or gyrocopter mount would be even cooler. That would give them true mobility and ability to kind of project power at a range. But even just having them, like, mounted to an artillery piece, you could have, like, oh, here's my engineer cannon. It actually does, you know, more missile damage than a regular cannon. And it's a relatively cheap mount because it's just the one single entity cannon, right? But as it is, he's just going to grind it out right here. Continue to smash and break bones and all that jazz. We take kind of an overarching look here. You can see Cetra is getting pretty low. He's been able to chase a lot of those units off. The Trollhammer torpedoes got a lot of damage in on him, given the XP chevron they've got. They're going to be pressured off the field now, and the balance power is still dead even. But one of those caskets got taken out by something. I don't know. Must have completely missed that. But the other casket here still firing. Maybe the Slayers went back and had a journey or something. But yeah, the two War Sphinxes, definitely very dangerous. But another beautifully placed fire ring of Thori there. Gets a little bit of damage in. And the Engineer just blasting. We'll keep it close with him now as he takes some shots at the big kitty. He's just very consistent, and if your opponent chooses to focus him, like, he's not the tankiest character, he can go down pretty easy. But, I mean, for the amount that you pay for him, he's really not too expensive. I would say he's not quite as meta as the Gunnery Wight, because he doesn't have a mount, and he doesn't feed ammo. The feed ammo thing from the Gunnery Wight is really something that sets him apart in my mind from the Dwarven Engineer, but the Dwarven Engineer is certainly not bad, and actually still is quite good. I want to say his base cost is like 700 points, exactly like a unit of Thunderers. We'll have to check that after the fact, but Cetra absolutely mobbing through. Gonna bully the Engineer a little bit, but Engineer's got plenty of protection. Dragonback Slayer's still fighting here. Thorgrim's still fighting. It's very close in terms of the balance of power, but this is where it comes in, the fact that he can, you know, do a little bit of armor piercing in melee, and then as soon as Cetra disengages, he can pull out his gun and start shooting. Well, after he cleans out some of the skeletons, I guess. But that's, in a late game situation, a lot of times as dwarfs, you'll find that you have your character squad left, and we've seen it even recently in this series, where Grombrindle and Felix were the only ones left, right? And they can only fight stuff in melee, so getting cycle charged is a big problem. Nice thing about the Engineer is because of that ranged attack, you're still doing damage to your opponent, even if they're cycle charging you, right? Yeah, he's not going to hold up in melee as good as those other characters, but the fact that he can still continue to poke while remaining stationary, I guess I'm starting to sound like a little bit of a broken record now, but it's just so good. So good for Dwarf's design for them to be able to have someone that can do that. Even if he does get bullied a little bit here in this late game, gets knocked down and gets up again and just keeps blasting. Or charging with the Cog Hammer. That's also a valid strategy. But yeah, just that quick weapon switch. Switch from melee mode to range mode. Hybrid utility units are a thing I'm a big fan of, as you guys may know. And in this type of a situation, they are quite good. Thorgrim also still pretty healthy here. But I keep watching for that Oath of Vengeance that Thorgrim has. I haven't actually seen it get tossed out. I'm assuming that Glorious Feeder, the dwarf player here, is throwing it around. I just haven't seen it as to where it's been. Here we go. Here we go. Now is the end of the Tomb King's army, getting ever closer to army losses. The balance power still, honestly, surprisingly even. That's mostly because of these monsters, but as soon as this Engineer gets up and free, he can start shooting again. Oh man, that Dwarf Warrior had a bad day. Just gets absolutely flung across the field. Cetra comes back over. But again, this is where the engineer comes in. You see how Cetra's cycle charging here? I mean, he can do that all he wants, but there's still someone who can shoot at him. Here he is. There's a little pop right there. And so it kind of puts Cetra on a little bit of a timer, like he can't just mercilessly cycle charge here. He does have to account for that. And every time he pulls away, he's getting not only hit in the back, but shot in the back as well. There's a poke. And the archers on the back of the Camarine War Sphinx, not really the same amount of poke in return. There's also the casket, wild casket shot coming in at the end there. But the longer this goes on, the longer the Tomb King's player waits to engage, the more the engineer's just going to pick away at the HP. And there he goes. Oh, Cetra with the pounce. Gives himself a little bit of physical resistance there, but now the Oath of Vengeance being used, finally caught one. You can see Cetra is down to only 18 melee defense, so even then he's low enough where the engineer could get some hits. Thorgrim also can get some hits. He's got some pretty legit weapon damage and also does magic damage, so he doesn't care at all about the Incantation of Protection, physical resistance. Oh man, look at this engineer, just takes the charge right to the face, gets absolutely punted. Brave little Dowie. But Thorgrim can't get punted. He is too heavy. He's too thick. So he can stand resolute on his chair while engineer tries to get some attacks. Come on, buddy. A little bit of a tough time to get attacks, and this is a Footlord problem, right? This is kind of the classic Footlord problem. His stagger lock is a very real thing, and just keeping up with your opponents can be a challenge. But at this point, I mean, it is pretty real crumbling. Surprised I haven't hit army losses. I mean, am I surprised, really? No, I'm not. It's undead. Cetra pops there. Engineer is, I'm sure, yeah, he's in here just studying the Tomb King's engineering and construction methods, no doubt. And the second War Sphinx goes down for him to study, and that's the game. Very well played to Glorious Feeder and his opponent there. I have no idea. No name here. Probably in some non-English or non-Latin characters. But anyway, very fun game. Nice to see the engineer get some solid work done. And really a big part of carrying that game. We don't get to see the amount of damage he did, unfortunately. But a lot of the damage that came against Cetra and this other War Sphinx had to have come from him. A good amount of it came from the Trollhammer torpedoes as well. Don't want to discount their contribution here. But the engineer, super important. 133 kills also for Dragonback Slayers, 81 kills there. Longbeard's also racking up some good kill totals. 100 kills, 3 XP chevrons for the War Sphinx, 59 for Cetra. You can see why there are such good units in this matchup. 111 kills also for Tomb Guards, super solid. I don't know, they must have got a hold of some Slayers or maybe the artillery crew or something a little more high value. But caskets are a little bit of a meme pick. One or two can be good, or one can be good. I think two is maybe a little bit of overkill. Yeah, it's just talking a little bit more about the engineer here. We go ahead. There's not a lot of heroes that are a great direct comparison, because most missile heroes now can shoot in 360. Really, the only ones that can't are this guy, the engineer, and of course, one of my other favorites, the Apex Zombie Gunnery Wight. So both these guys only fire forward. We have a look at their stats. The Gunnery Wight is a tiny bit cheaper base cost. Oh no, actually the same. I think this guy used to be 700. Now he's only 600, which is really solid for the cost. The Gunnery Wight does more damage in melee, but has, you know, probably honestly similar armor piercing damage. What is this? 220 AP here. And this guy has 140, so I guess significantly less AP, but just more weapon damage overall. Stats are surprisingly comparable, considering that it's a dwarf and a zombie. As is the speed, obviously. The Gunnery Wight has less leadership and less armor for the Gunnery Wight, but he can make up for that by taking the crab, which, I mean, granted, does make him a lot more expensive, but he gets more HP as well, a lot more armor, some more mobility, and better melee stats. But as far as their abilities set go, I would say, like I said before, the Gunnery Wight's ability to feed ammo, and this is not something you have to pay for, it comes for free with him. means that, yeah, definitely better than the Dwarven Engineer. 45 ammunition as well. I guess it's literally the same missile attack for both of them. The Master Engineer does have Dwarven magic resistance, but he doesn't get anything else for free. You can take that extra powder, ballistics calibration, entrenchment you want. The Fire Ring of Thori is really the only one that's castable at a range, so it's probably the best. This other one, the Prospector Spyglass, accuracy really isn't that important as much as you may think. Entrenchment is nice. I guess this one is also castable at 150 meter range, which is pretty good. It affects, yeah, only one target it looks like, so that's a little bit rough to pay. 162 gold, especially the fact that it snares your own unit. Maybe not the best, but it does give them plus 40% armor-piercing missile damage, so especially like if this guy is standing like in that situation, let's say, where he's going to get cycle charged and then have to return fire immediately, this entrenchment can help him do both things. I mean, it's not like you're going to be chasing your opponent at that point anyway, so you might as well net yourself. Ballistics calibration, again, same thing. The reload skill is nice. The accuracy is something that's kind of hard to put a value on. I've never found accuracy buffs to be super impactful in my experience, but it's also there, as is the extra powder. This is something that's passive, so it might be worth bringing. You're going to stand him. The explosive missile damage and base explosive damage is pretty good for something that has a lot of explosion, like, I don't know, like maybe the flame cannon, or even just standing him like amongst a unit of either iron breakers or miners with blasting charges while they're throwing the charges will help them deal that little bit of extra explosive damage, which is quite good. And mostly it's just the fact that he's like dirt cheap, like with only Fire Ring of Thori, what, yeah, 763 for a single entity that has great ranged power and can actually do something besides just waddle around, which for dwarfs is great. So hopefully you guys get the picture. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.